Welcome to BizTech's Women in Leadership Show. In conjunction with International Women's Day 2023, we bring you a Women in Leadership series where we connect you with some of the most successful female leaders in the Asia-Pacific region to uncover the tenacity of each woman leader and how they've pushed boundaries and risen to the top of their respective industries. Our guest for today is Melanie Cochrane. She's the Group Managing Director of Equifax, Australia and New Zealand. Now, Equifax has grown from a consumer credit company to a leading provider of insights and knowledge that help its customers make informed decisions. Now, to tell us more about this, Melanie, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Brian.
Now, Melanie, for a start, give us an overview of Equifax and its history.
Sure. Well, I actually joined Equifax in May of 21, so I'm not quite at my 2-year mark, and I've just loved being here. Equifax is a global company, and really the purpose and mission is helping people live their financial best, and that's kind of what we anchor to. But essentially what we are is a data, advanced analytics and technology company, and we provide insights and solutions that help customers grow and help move people forward. So what we do in Australia and New Zealand in particular, we have a very diverse business across many different solutions and industries. So known for probably more traditionally consumer and credit risk, we also have fraud and identity solutions, verifications of income, of background, and we also have a ratings business. So it's really broad business that cuts across traditional risk and credit scores, where perhaps was the origin of our business, but it's much broader than that now.
Okay,
so
could
really
you give us, Melanie, and some insights into specific customers and how you help them?
So everything from financial services, we help lenders make decisions, whether that's in consumer and commercial spaces. We help government. We actually were the background screening behind the Electoral Commission, and we supported them through the election process last year. We have a ratings business where we actually do ratings for construction industry. So we rate building and property developers and actually have a full background and supply chain screen for those. So consumers know if they're buying an apartment off the plan or a new build, that it's going to not have defects later. They can trust and have transparency in that business. And whether it's for consumers, understanding their credit history, understanding what's important about financial literacy and education in particular, where we help consumers to ensure that they know how do they get access, how do they build a strong profile and credit history, and then when making decisions like buying an apartment, that they have the information that they need. So it cuts across all different industries, different types of businesses that we support, and consumers ultimately, how they benefit to live their financial best.
Now, Melanie, I want to shift the focus to the core of our interview today, which is on women and leadership and gender equality, particularly in finance-related roles. And we also want to talk about your personal journey as a female leader. So for a start, could you tell us your journey as a corporate person, a leader in corporations, and having spent, of course, the bulk of your career, more than 2 decades, with American Express?
That's right. So I moved around a lot. I think my career is captured in the breadth and diversity. So I started in roles in marketing. I led sales teams. I ran operations. I moved into many different roles. My last role at American Express was leading the Global Merchant Services division for the Asia-Pac region, and I'd led the corporate payments business as well for this region. And then prior to that, I'd ran the global digital transformation business, which was based in the US, but a global digital transformation program. So my career has really been one of diversity and breadth. I gained a lot of experience in different functional roles. And that was really where I think my kind of career unfolded, was that I learned to say yes more often than no, and was often asked or encouraged to take roles that perhaps were not the most obvious roles.
Yes,
And
because
those
I
are the
saw
ones,
in your career, you've even worked in places like Arizona. It's not sexy like London or New York, but Arizona, you took the job.
pretty sexy in Arizona too. No, I tell you what, I worked in New York. That was very fun, an amazing part of my career to actually work in the headquarters of the multinational big global company. So that was, like a movie set, showing up in New York on the, first day. And so from there, I, took the opportunity to move out to this region and then back to the US. The leader at the time when I went to Arizona, I said, it's really hot there. So yes, and I was like, I'm used to humidity. I wasn't used to the dry heat, but it was actually a big center for American Express. We had a lot of our technology teams, a lot of our customer service teams, and this is where I did the digital transformation role as well. But it was actually great from business perspective and personal. Arizona was a great place to live. It's beautiful outdoors. It's surprising what you learn when you move around.
So when you start, and so this is an interesting thing, right? You said yes more often. You just said that just now, than no. Was that part of the reason why you think that you've had such a great career? Because you were able to then leapfrog perhaps other men or other women for that matter, because you were able to say yes more often than no?
Yeah, and it's often advice I give to people as well that it's very easy to have too much of a clear path about what your career is going to look like and what type of roles you want next. I think having an open mind to saying yes to things that are not necessarily as obvious. And it wasn't just about whether you've got the appetite to move countries. Not everybody wants to do that or has the practical ability to do that with family commitments or other things. So it's not just about moving countries. It's actually about taking some of the roles that aren't necessarily the most obvious ones to give you that breadth. So, I mean, I used to have a saying that I think everybody needs to do a period of their career working in a customer service and an operations environment to know what it is that you're promising up front and how you deliver that. And you really get insight into the customer advocacy. For me, really was born from understanding what our customer needs were by working in that side of the business. So I think it's more about getting that breadth and encouraging people, not to think about, well, I'm not sure if I've got the skills for that, or I'm not sure that that's the kind of team or job that I want to work in. I think that's where by saying yes and leading with okay, let me be open-minded about what I will learn from this next opportunity. So I was taught that early. I learned that very early on, that I learned more by doing a difficult job or perhaps not so obvious job as to where I would go next, and not just staying in my functional line.
Now, because you stayed in one organization for so many years, did you have champions and mentors to then guide you along the way?
Yes, I certainly did. And I had a lot of male champions as well. I think that people who are willing to take a risk on someone and help support them in their career. I had many mentors, and often, your most immediate one is your leader. And so doing a great job in the role that you're in, working really hard and delivering on what you say you're going to, it's kind of the foundation. But then being open to exploring and being more confident with your leader to be able to say what your ambitions are and feel safe to do that. So then your leader can help support, encourage and open up doors for you and open those opportunities for you. But I definitely tapped on, many ex-leaders, mentors who have continued to provide support for me.
Now, Melanie, you alluded to the fact that, and one really good piece of advice which you shared was obviously the fact that you've done customer service roles, operational roles, and so, and also you've moved around a lot.
Yeah.
How has all of this shaped your management style?
Well, I think from that breadth of diversity, so one, you gain a lot of different perspectives. So from a management style, you learn how to be more open-minded, have a bigger breadth, know that you also don't know everything. I'm certainly learning that in this role. I'm not a data scientist or an engineer, so I need to make sure I have the right people at the table. And so shaping my experience, really, you learn different cultures. I mean, the countries I've lived in, and the responsibilities across this region, 9 countries that I had responsibility for, everyone had its own cultural differences, the geography experience, and then that functional experience. I think it really helped round you out to be an open leader. And for me, it learned to be a bit more authentic. I had to learn how to connect with people and show who I was so that I could build those relationships, particularly in different cultures. I found it was important to really embrace learning about other people's cultures, and business practices in different countries, creates a very different breadth. So I think that definitely the breadth helps shape that. But I think ultimately it comes down to what's been, what I found works for me, and what I like is about having an open, transparent, and authentic relationship with your team and with your leaders. So you feel safe, and trusted, that you can really get the best out of people, and likewise you feel like you can trust your leader that they have your back. And those are really important traits, I think.
Now, being a woman in the finance industry and rising up the ranks, did you feel that at times being a woman was a disadvantage?
I'm not so much a disadvantage. I think I was lucky in that I think multinational organizations have a different breadth. I know statistically our numbers of women in senior roles were higher at American Express than other industry groups. I think the challenge is more when you feel like you don't belong, and so you need to see what you can be. And the role that I can play now is that, particularly in our industry, in data analytics and technology teams, we do skew more heavily towards men than women in our makeup. And so we've worked really hard in how do we create role models, how do we make people feel like they can belong in the organization, regardless of gender diversity, and really, ways of working, everything. People need to feel that they belong. So I think you've experienced that as a female. You understand when you're in a room and you're the only female around the table, that sometimes you feel like, am I allowed to be here?
Okay, that's an interesting perspective. Am I allowed to be here? But
when you're younger, you get more confidence as you grow in the career, but it is intimidating. Yeah.
And this is a very real thing, because an article in The Guardian basically outlined the fact that gender equality and let's look at a very senior roles in Australia. Gender equality is 100 years away based on current trends. This is for Australia's top companies. And I think you alluded to that prior to this interview when you mentioned that only 5% of ASX chief executives are actually women.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, it astounds me. I think that article referred to glacial speed or something. It will take over 100 years. The chief executive women group here in Australia have also released their census. And I think, to get paid gender equality, pay the gender pay gap to be equal, to get equal numbers, you're talking 100, 150 years at the pace that we're going. So it astounds me that the amount of focus that we've had on this conversation, with International Women's Day coming up, and for this series, that we still really haven't moved the needle. It's not moving fast enough.
And it's funny, Melanie, and we were also speaking about this. And you have had APAC roles. So Australia, from a developmental standpoint, should be is seen as obviously a developed nation, ahead of the curve in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
But even in terms of gender diversity in leadership roles, Australia is far behind even places, Islamic countries like Malaysia, where there are significant amounts of women in leadership roles, whether it's the civil service or whether it's boardrooms in Malaysia or places like Singapore, which is obviously ahead of the curve.
Yeah. It's a really interesting point. And I asked the same question because I live here and I'm like, why is it taking us so long? And the Australian Institute of Company Directors have also released some of their statistics this year. Women on boards has actually been improving quite well, to the point where it's around 30% of larger companies have female representation on boards. But that has been slow, but has picked up some pace. I think in Australia, for particularly the larger companies, I think one, it's seeing women that people can aspire to. So people have to see role models and have to see that happening. But it's also having more systematic programs and ways in which to develop female leaders. I still think there's some cultural underlying challenges here that I don't know that all women see that they have the choice to make it all the way, and that there are practical barriers to doing so. And they feel like they still have a choice between their families and a career. And so what are the structural things that organizations need to do to change that? It's also taking risks on female leaders where I think, I don't know, maybe in Australia, whether we've been more conservative on thinking outside of the box and tending to hire people who have had the same experience as the person who did the job prior, versus looking at somebody who has the leadership potential, and that with the right support, you can take a bet on someone that may be greener, or take a bet on someone that maybe has a different experience to then bring them, through the ranks. And so it's about having those programs. I think there's the lack of risk taking in putting enough women into senior roles and putting bets on people.
And I think that extends globally in the financial services industry, because essentially, if you talk about, and this is a Deloitte study, in financial services firms globally, I think the proportion of women in leadership roles is about 24% only, and it's only projected to grow to about 28% by 2030. And this is something that you need to probably look at from a much broader lens, as you outline specific programs in terms of growing the timber to make sure that the women are not there to make the numbers up.
Yeah.
They're actually prepared for it.
That's right. And also, even when someone may not have everything, it's then creating the support around them to help them develop while in the role. So, we don't suddenly arrive in a new job and know how to do it from the first day. So what are some of those other support mechanisms? But I think the other thing, one of the things that we've done at Equifax, my leadership team is 45% women. And it's not just because I was here. I came into this role with a very diverse leadership team. But women, female leaders are attracted to where they see they can be successful. And if there's only male leaders at the executive level, they're not going to be attracted to that organization, as they don't see there's a place for them at the table.
Okay, so Melanie, I want to ask you then, let's put you, Equifax, in the spotlight. What's your report card like from a diversity, equity, and inclusion perspective?
Yeah, so we are a few things. So what my leadership team, I think, is pretty good. But we do have some challenges within pockets of our teams at different levels. We struggle to attract talent and female talent, I think, as the industry does in technology roles, often in some in data analytics teams, and in B2B, even in a lot of our customer-facing teams who are facing off against a lot of male constituents as well. So we've got pockets. What we do, one, we all have our leadership team globally, and a long way down, we have very specific goals in our own scorecards around when we have a recruitment process, making sure we have a balanced talent candidate list. We have gender pay reporting that we do as part of legislation here, but we make adjustments to make sure we have equality in our gender pay. We're putting in place policies that are allow for more flexibility. Not just for gender, but also diversity more broadly. So we have like a public holiday swap. If you don't celebrate a certain public holiday, like Easter, you can switch it out for a different holiday or a different celebration or a different, cultural traditional celebration. So we're doing things like that signal that we want diversity in our organization. And
Melanie, I think that's
signals that are important.
That's a good signal, and in a place like Australia, which is becoming quite a melting pot. You have Hindus, you have Muslims, you have Catholics, and as you said, the ability to then swap out your holidays and celebrate Thaipusam or Hari Raya Haji instead of Christmas and and Easter, I think is a small but important step in terms of ensuring inclusion of your workforce.
Yeah, that's right. And it's those signals that say we want a diverse, talent pool. We want you to come and work here. And ultimately people will come and work somewhere and stay working somewhere if they feel like they belong. We also do other signals, where we're very actively involved. One of the things that was recent for us was in the Women in Security for the Australian Women in Security Network. And we actually won a highly commended award this year, and we've been able to develop talent within our own security team. So again, it's publicly showing, what are the things that we are doing that we're committed to through our policies, through our hiring practices. We have our own scorecards too, but really, what are the things that make people feel like they belong and want to come and work and stay working here?
Now, one of the interesting stats that you shared with us about Equifax is 45% of your leadership team is women. Now, how does that also translate to the business as a whole from an equity, diversity, and inclusion perspective? Because one of the key things is in a multicultural place like Australia, how do you bring in, for example, Indigenous people or people who are migrants into to Australia, and then blend them into your organization?
Yeah, well, there's a number of programs actually. There's a great hiring. There's different recruitment channels you can go to hire. Whether it's neurodiverse, particularly in some of our science roles and analyst roles. It's looking at veteran hiring services. There's a lot of different, agencies actually that support particular profiles and backgrounds. So if you open up your candidate pool, beyond just your typical hiring, agency that you might, or there are some specialized groups, you can actually really broaden your talent profile. So I think that's a really, a very practical way to make sure, are you actually pulling in and for migration. I mean, we see certainly coming out of universities and coming into data and analytics, coming into technology teams, that's a great feeder pool. And, we have relationships with universities where we can bring in interns. So, it's thinking about holistically, how are you attracting a diverse workforce?
Now, Melanie, what advice would you give Australian businesses, particularly large Australian businesses, to help them attract better women candidates and also have more diversity within their workforces?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of the things I've already talked about, but it's those very public external signals that are important. And it's about having role models that people can see, across all diversity, not just gender. But if you look at the first thing I know, probably, most people do, if they're researching a company that they want to work for, they'll probably go and look at the executive team or the board or the management team. And, that'll be a signal, externally to the diversity and the culture in the organization. Now, then the next layer down is, well, what do they prioritize diversity in their, communications, in how they show up externally. So that's an important part. But actually on the ground, you then have to, to walk that talk in your day to day as well. And so I think that those flexibility programs, thinking about, holiday swap was one example, but there's a lot of ways in which you demonstrate diversity. From a leadership program, though, I think, actually investing in female talent that you can see are your future leaders and having very targeted and intensive support for, individuals to ensure that they can see a path to develop their potential. And the investment in those kind of grassroots leadership programs, I think, really is your seeds and feeder pool for future female leaders.
Melanie, it's been a great conversation. I've really enjoyed it, learned a lot as well. But before we leave, what are the parting words of wisdom that you'd like to share with all women across the APAC region on this special Women's Day edition of BizTech's Women in Leadership?
Well, I think I said it earlier, but I would say, lead with yes. Even if inside the voice is going, I'm not sure I can do that. I think, it's starting with why not? I can do this. Don't look at your gaps, look at your strengths and start with, being open-minded, start with that yes.
Melanie, thank you very much for coming on the show.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me, Brian.
Now, we've been speaking to Melanie Cochrane, the Group Managing Director of Equifax, Australia and New Zealand. I'm Brian Fernandez, and you've been watching and listening to BizTech's Women in Leadership show. This interview will be on our website, www.biztech.asia, as well as our social media platforms. It'll also be on our syndication partners, TV stations, radio stations, and websites. Thanks a lot for tuning in.